Good morning, everyone. Today I'd like to recount a story about my childhood. It was a fairly interesting childhood. My parents, I was the youngest of five. I have two brothers and two sisters who were quite a bit older than me. And by the time I reached the age of 10, my two sisters were married. One brother was in the military serving in Vietnam, and my other brother was serving in an apprenticeship, and he was living in Sydney. At that time, we were living at Wentworth Falls in the Blue Mountains, and my parents decided that as many older people, or there's quite a few older people in Australia, that when they reach heading towards retirement age, they decide to do the nomad, they call it greying nomad trip around Australia. And so they sold up everything and bought a caravan or a camper, an RV, and decided to do a working holiday, a very long working holiday around Australia. So I was enrolled in the Sydney Correspondence School. So I did my schooling from the age of 10 by correspondence. So I had my parents teaching me, which maybe wasn't the best, but it served. And anyway, as I said, I had a very interesting childhood. But I'd like to relate one small episode during that time that I think is quite interesting. We were traveling from Perth through the centre of Western Australia, the road, the inland road of Western Australia, heading north towards Port Hedland and Broome, and eventually into Northern Territory. And we made a stop at a place called Mount Magnet. Now, Mount Magnet was a gold mining town. They had a large underground gold mine there. And while we were parked there, we were approached by a German man, and who struck a conversation. He was also interested in buying a caravan at some stage and doing what we were doing. So they struck up a conversation, and then it turned out that he knew somebody who knew somebody that could get my father some work. My father was a labourer, so he could get him some work on the road construction in that Mount Magnet area. And so he invited us to come and park our caravan in his backyard, and so we were there for a while. During that time, my parents were able to obtain a carved emu egg from an Aboriginal man. And I'll show you that, and I'll relate more about that in a short while. But in the meantime, we'll continue on the journey. So after a while at Mount Magnet, it was time to move on, and actually the German family had bought their caravan, and they were leaving. They left on the same day that we did. So that was one reason that we moved on, because we could no longer stay in their garden because they were in a mine, a home that belonged to the mines. So we were headed north. The inland road was a dirt road, and the road from Mount Magnet heading north was very badly corrugated. It was, just like that, and it was bump, bump, bump. It was really not a comfortable journey at all. Very dusty and corrugation. And at some stage in the journey, we'd stop for some morning tea, or it could have been lunch. And when we went into the caravan, there was cupboards open, there was things all tipped out onto the floor. It was a complete mess in there. And, everyone, what's happened? Why is it like this? Because, when you're going to travel, you lock all the doors and pack everything up, very, very, very well for the travel. And so my father did an inspection of the caravan, and he went around and he found that that one set of the springs, or the suspension springs, had broken. He's a very handy person, so he was able to adapt the broken springs in some way that managed to use it as a spring for a while, long enough to get us to hobble into the next township. And that township was a very tiny little town. The name was Nullagine. It's sort of towards the top of the inland road, and I'm not sure of the population at that time, but maybe 10 white people living there, or no more than 20 or 30 anyway, but I'd say, yeah. There was a police station. I think there was a school, and there was a pub. Of course, every town has to have a pub. And there was a general store, which was also the post office. And so my father had contacted the caravan manufacturer in Sydney, and had arranged for them to send a replacement set of springs. Back in those days, would have been an overland journey, and it took quite a while, a few weeks, for the springs to come. Also in the township, it was sort of located on the sides of banks of a small river or a creek of some kind. And I'm not sure, I don't think there was water in that thing, but anyway, there was a camping ground, and I think they had a bathroom there just for people passing through, but they didn't have any facilities, no electricity. I don't think they had showers. There might have been an outdoor shower, I'm not sure, but it was very basic. But anyway, we camped there, and so we had to find things to do in those few weeks we were there. You know, the outback of Australia is very hot. You don't want to be stuck in the caravan every day for weeks on end. So we did a few like road trips, and one of the trips was we'd gone for a drive out along some dirt track, and there was a creek bed. A creek, I guess you'd call it a stream maybe, but in Australia we call them creeks. And it was dry. You know, there's all a stony bottom, pebbles and stones on the bottom. And my mother was an avid rock collector. She was always searching for that opal find or sapphire or some other kind of, you know, gemstone that she might find. And she'd be there with her butt in the air, bent over, and my father and I would be twiddling our thumbs or trying to find a shady gum tree to sit under to while away the time. But anyway, I was exploring in the creek bed also, and I came across this piece of wood which looked like a bat of some kind, and I picked it up and I said, to my father, this looks like a good bat, you know, and maybe we can play some cricket, you know. And he said, it looks like some kind of an Aboriginal or a First Nation Australian, I guess it's a tool. But anyway, what it turned out to be was a woomera. The woomera is used as, it attaches to the end of the spear, and it's used to propel the spear with a much greater speed and distance than it would normally be able to use it for. So the woomera, I think it's made of mulga wood. Out in the outback Australia, mulga is like the common tree, and it's a hardwood. And I'm sure this is definitely a hardwood because I brought that woomera. I've kept it since 1968, and I've brought it to Thailand with me 45 years ago, and it's still in the same condition it was when I found it. And in Thailand, especially, you know, in my garden, we have so many termites, and I thought if this was not mulga, it wouldn't have made it, or some kind of hardwood. So it's definitely a hardwood. So I've got it here. Let me show you what it looks like. So this is what it is here. Now I'm not sure if the hole is a natural hole or if it was carved in there. I think it might be just like a natural. But anyway, I think it attaches to this end, and I've seen some images where they put some binding around there, and and attach it to the spear, and then they throw the spear, and then this like propels it at a greater speed. Well, like I'm 100% sure that's what it is, because I can actually see some carvings. It's just like a zigzag coming down the side of the spear, and I'll show it close up. You can see there's a very faint carved line there, which is a zigzaggy line. Now, I'm not sure if this was just weathered like this by being in the open elements in the creek bed, or if it's very much older than, you know, if it's sort of like a very ancient piece of woomera. But it is very old, and as I said, I found it in 1968, so it's at least 60 years old. So I hope you found that interesting. But anyway, also when we were in Nullagine, another interesting fact about my mother is that she could have a conversation with anybody, any nation, any class, any person. She would start a conversation, and usually very long conversations. She was talking to some Aboriginal people, and she'd ask them if anybody carved emu eggs. And one Aboriginal man said, "Yes, I carve emu eggs." And so my mother had, in addition to the carved ones that she had already purchased, she had another, just a plain emu egg that we'd gotten somewhere. And so she said to the man, "Would you be able to carve an emu egg for me? I've got the emu and I'll pay you for it." And so he said, "Yeah, I can do it." So she gave him the emu egg, and they made an appointment for when he would bring the carved emu egg back to her. So her plan was to give like one carved emu egg to each of my two older sisters. So on the appointed day, he comes back with the emu egg, and he's very proud. I remember that he was very proud and smiling, and he brought out the emu egg, and it sort of had some cracks in it, you know, and then it was just like a few lines of the outline of an emu and a kangaroo, I think it was. My mother did pay him for the carving the emu egg, because they had the agreement, and he had carved the emu egg, even if it was just a very basic and not non-professional. It was a carved emu egg, and it was better probably than any souvenir because of the story that went with it. So I think they kept that emu egg, and I think they passed it on to one of my brothers. They ended up keeping the emu egg. When my mother passed away, my father gave me the emu egg, because he said, you know, that this is your only souvenir. They're always buying souvenirs for the people back home, but I was with them, so I didn't have any souvenirs except for the woomera that I found. So they said, "This is your souvenir." So I've got the emu egg here, and I'll show it to you. This is the carved one. Now, it is kept in this can. This is a Sunshine Milk can, and it's been in there. I should have it mounted somewhere, but I'm so worried that it's going to get broken, and it's been in here since 1968. So I'll pull it out. So the emus are, the colors range from a very bright green to this sort of very darkish green. I guess it depends on what the emus eat and things like that. But that's what the actual shell looks like, the emu egg looks like. And the carving it's carved all around with this. Now, this was obtained in Western Australia. The symbol of Western Australia is the black swan in Perth. The river that runs through Perth is called the Swan River, and there are many black swans that are in that area in the southwest of Western Australia. So on that side is the swans, and you can see the very fine carving. The deeper you go into the shell, the lighter the color of the shell is. Okay, and then on this side, the iconic emu. So two emus there lying on the ground in underneath the mountains. There we go. So I've seen more intricate carved emu eggs, but I believe now that they can make them in factories as like souvenirs that are done by machines. But I'm very proud that this is a genuine hand carved by First Nation people. So I'm glad I have this. Anyway, another story, while we were in Nullagine, we did another trip, which was to a little bit north. It was a one-day round trip, and a little bit north of Nullagine there is another town called Marble Bar, and it's named from the vein of marble, or the big marble rocks there, and they're very pretty colored marble. And what people do is there's a pond or a stream or something. I remember that my father actually had a Sunshine milk can, and I think I've got a photo, and I'll put it on here if I've got that photo. But he threw the water onto the marble, and you can see the colors stand out, and it's very pretty. I believe that is like a national heritage site of some kind, but that was very pretty. Anyway, my life as a child growing up in Central Australia was very, very interesting. If you'd like to hear more, let me know, and I'll relate some other stories, because there are a lot. I've lived in the middle of the Nullarbor Plains. I've lived in a place called Borroloola on the Gulf of Carpentaria, as well as some mining sites in the north of Queensland. So and also fruit picking areas. So if you'd like some stories about that, let me know, and I'll relate some other stories to you. I hope you enjoyed it. Please comment and let me know what you think about this, and if you'd like to hear any more stories about that. And in the meantime, have a great day, and sawadee ka.